Ancient peoples built entire cities where it seemed no one could. They carved homes into cliff faces and raised fortresses on peaks that touched the clouds. This was not fantasy, but a calculated strategy for survival. By the end of this exploration, you will see history's most breathtaking strongholds through the eyes of the defenders who conceived them. How did a community vanish beneath the earth at a moment's notice, and what drove monks to build their sanctuaries in the sky? These stories reveal a profound truth about our ancestors' relationship with the world around them. What does it truly mean to feel safe? The decision to live somewhere so difficult was never made lightly. It emerged from a cold, clear-eyed assessment of the world. For the communities we are about to meet, the greatest threat was not the land itself, but the other people who wanted it. In a time before standing armies or rapid communication, security was not a public service, it was a personal project. Every family, every clan, every fledgling city-state had to become its own fortress. And so, the most brilliant strategists of the ancient world looked not to their stockpiles of weapons, but to the landscape itself. They asked a simple, powerful question: how can the very earth beneath our feet fight for us? This is the philosophy of inaccessibility. It transforms a mountain from a barrier into a shield. It sees a raging river not as something to cross, but as a moat that never needs filling. A sheer cliff face becomes a wall that cannot be scaled or sapped. This thinking moves defense from something you build to something you find. You are not constructing a fort, you are identifying a natural fort and then building your home within it. The hardship of carrying water up a steep path or of having only one narrow entrance was not a flaw in the plan, it was the entire point. These challenges were a filter. They were manageable for a resident who knew every step and every handhold, but they were a nightmare for an invading force laden with gear and unfamiliar with the terrain. The goal was to control the terms of any potential conflict completely. You force your enemy to fight where you are strongest and they are weakest. A narrow mountain pass turns a vast army into a vulnerable line, easily ambushed. A single causeway to a city on a rock forces attackers to come forward in tiny numbers where they can be met by concentrated force. Geography became a force multiplier, making a small group of defenders as potent as a legion. It was the ultimate strategic leverage. This was not about hiding away in fear. It was about choosing a position of such overwhelming defensive strength that you rarely had to fight at all. The mere sight of your city clinging impossibly to a peak or surrounded by impassable gorges could be the greatest deterrent of all. This philosophy of environmental mastery sets the stage for the incredible, almost unbelievable places where our story truly begins. The philosophy of inaccessibility found its most breathtaking expression high in the Andes, 2,400 meters above sea level. Nestled on a narrow ridge between the peaks of Machu Picchu and Huayna Picchu, sits a city that feels less built and more discovered. The Incas did not conquer this landscape, they conversed with it. Machu Picchu is not a fortress placed upon a mountain, it is a mountain that was carefully persuaded to become a city. Every structure, from the Temple of the Sun to the residential quarters, follows the natural contours of the ridge, its stones cut and fitted with such precision they seem to grow from the bedrock itself. This was not just architectural skill, it was a profound statement of belonging. By becoming one with the mountain, the city achieved a form of camouflage, its lines blending into the cliffs and forests around it. For centuries, it remained a secret known only to the clouds. Its primary defense was not a wall, but a journey. Reaching this cloud kingdom required navigating a labyrinth of Inca trails, paths carved along sheer cliff faces and across roaring rivers. The final approach was often a single, narrow stone staircase, easily watched and impossible to ascend quickly by a group. An invading army, burdened by supplies and struggling with the thin air, would be strung out and vulnerable long before they ever saw a gate. And there was only one main gate, a strategic choke point that could be sealed with a few well-placed stones. Once inside, the city was designed for resilience. Its famous agricultural terraces were more than just farmland. They were a sophisticated system for growing food at altitude, ensuring the community could withstand a prolonged isolation. Water flowed through stone channels from sacred springs, providing a secure and constant supply. This was a sanctuary, a self-contained world where the Inca elite could retreat, secure in the knowledge that the mountains themselves were their guardians. Its eventual abandonment and subsequent hiding for centuries proved the strategy's ultimate success. The location itself was the secret that kept it safe. Yet the Incan mastery of vertical terrain was not the only way to forge security from stone. Far to the east, in the arid deserts of what is now Jordan, an entire civilization chose a defense of profound and deliberate concealment. The city of Petra was not built upon the land, but excavated directly from it, a secret metropolis hewn from the living rock. Its famous rose-red cliffs were not a backdrop for the city, they were the city itself. This was the stronghold of the Nabateans, a people who transformed a harsh, waterless landscape into an unassailable fortress of commerce and culture. Their primary defense was a geological riddle, a doorway that was nearly impossible to find and utterly treacherous to enter. To reach Petra, you must first pass through the Sick. This is not a road or a gate, but a deep, natural fissure in the earth, a winding canyon so narrow in places that only a sliver of sky is visible overhead. For over a mile, any approaching traveler is funneled through this shadowy corridor, with towering rock walls pressing in on both sides. The psychological effect is immense, a feeling of being swallowed by the earth. For a potential invader, this was a tactical nightmare. An army marching through the Sick would be stretched into a thin, vulnerable line, completely exposed to attack from the cliffs above. A handful of defenders could rain down arrows or simply roll boulders, trapping the entire force in a stone tomb of their own making. The Nabateans did not need to build high walls. The canyon walls were already there, hundreds of feet tall and utterly unscalable from within. But their genius extended beyond the entrance. Petra's true lifeline and its second layer of defense was water. In a desert region, controlling water is the ultimate power. The Nabateans were master hydrologists. They constructed an intricate network of channels, dams, and cisterns that captured every precious drop of seasonal rainwater, storing it in vast reservoirs hidden within the city. This meant that while Petra's inhabitants could thrive for months or even years, any besieging army camped in the surrounding desert would face a swift and certain fate: dehydration. The city's defense was hydrological, turning the very absence of water into a weapon. This combination of concealed access and resource control made Petra more than just a fortress. It was a brilliant economic engine. By securing the trade routes for incense, spices, and silks, and offering caravans a safe, well-supplied haven, the Nabateans grew immensely wealthy. Their security allowed for flourishing art and architecture, seen in the breathtaking facades like the treasury, carved directly into the cliff face. Petra's strength was an illusion of impossibility, a city that seemed to appear magically from the stone, protected not by armies, but by the deliberate, intelligent manipulation of an entire ecosystem. It was a fortress that asked a simple, daunting question of any enemy: how do you conquer a secret? Petra's strength lay in its secrecy, a hidden kingdom of stone. But sometimes the goal was not concealment, but a declaration so bold it dared the world to try and break it. Rising 400 meters above the stark shores of the Dead Sea, the fortress of Masada is not hidden at all. It is a stark, solitary sentinel, a flat-topped rock mesa that commands the entire horizon. Its defense is one of pure, terrifying geometry. The cliffs are vertical, the plateau is isolated, and the only natural path to the summit is a thin, treacherous track known as the Snake Path. For anyone standing below, the message was unmistakable. You cannot reach us, King Herod the Great, a ruler perpetually fearful of both external enemies and his own people, saw this natural fortress and understood its potential perfectly. In the 1st century before the Common Era, he transformed the summit into a lavish palace complex, complete with storehouses, barracks, and ingenious cisterns carved into the rock to hold millions of liters of rainwater. It was designed to be a perfect refuge, a place where he could wait out any rebellion or invasion in royal comfort, utterly untouchable. Decades later, that same design would be tested in a way Herod could never have imagined. Following a great revolt, a group of Jewish zealots and their families seized Masada, making it their final stronghold against the might of Rome. The Roman 10th Legion, one of the empire's most formidable military machines, arrived to crush this last pocket of defiance. What followed was not a battle, but a brutal demonstration of engineering versus environment. The Romans looked at those sheer cliffs and the single, defensible path and made a calculated decision. A direct assault would be a slaughter of their own troops, so they chose to change the landscape itself. For months, thousands of enslaved laborers worked under the desert sun, building a colossal ramp of earth and timber up the western side of the mesa. It was a mountain moving to conquer a mountain, an act of sheer will that slowly, inexorably negated Masada's primary defense. The ramp, whose stark outline remains visible today, is a permanent scar on the earth, a testament to the Roman belief that no fortress was truly impossible, only expensive. When the legion finally breached the walls with a battering ram, they found a silence that was more profound than any battle cry. Facing capture and a fate they found unacceptable, the defenders had made a final, collective choice. The story of that choice, passed down by the historian Josephus, has echoed through centuries, transforming Masada from a military objective into a powerful symbol of resistance and the high cost of freedom. The siege proved a grim equation that even the most perfect natural defense could be overcome with enough resources, time, and relentless determination. But it also asked a haunting question that lingers over the empty ruins to this day. What does a victory cost when the landscape itself has been defeated? While Masada stood defiant under a desert sun, another fortress drew its power from a rhythm far older than any empire. The sea itself became a living, breathing wall for Mont Saint-Michel. This is not a castle on a hill, but a granite island rising like a dream from the vast, shimmering tidal flats of Normandy. For centuries, its defense was not measured in the height of its walls, but in the phases of the moon and the relentless pulse of the Atlantic tides. The landscape here is never still. Twice each day, the sea performs a breathtaking retreat, pulling back for miles to reveal a glistening, sandy causeway leading directly to the island's gate. And twice each day, with a speed that can outrun a galloping horse, the water returns, swallowing the path and transforming Mont Saint-Michel back into an isolated island, surrounded by swirling currents and treacherous quicksand. This natural phenomenon created the most dynamic moat in history. For any medieval army contemplating an attack, the calculus was terrifying. You could march your forces across the exposed flats, but your window for assault or retreat was brutally short. A delay, a stubborn gate, a single missed signal, and the sea would come for you not as a wave, but as a rising flood across a featureless plain with no high ground to escape to. The risk was not just defeat, but a mass drowning, a fate that made even the most determined commander pause. The Benedictine monks who built the original abbey atop the rock, and the kings who later fortified it, understood this power perfectly. They did not fight the tide, they collaborated with it. The single fortified bridge and the series of gates leading up the steep village streets were the final man-made obstacles, but the true guardian was the timetable written in the ocean. A besieging army could not simply camp at the gates, they would be washed away. They had to retreat to the distant mainland after every low tide, an exhausting and demoralizing cycle that broke sieges before they could truly begin. The community inside was tuned to this rhythm, storing supplies and managing their lives by the ebb and flow. Their security was a partnership with the natural world, a recognition that the most powerful forces are often the ones we cannot control, only learn to anticipate. Mont Saint-Michel stands as a testament to a different kind of strategic genius, one that looked not to the solidity of rock, but to the fluid, immutable clockwork of the planet itself. It asks us to consider a fortress that is only sometimes there, a stronghold that exists in two states, island and peninsula, its accessibility a fleeting gift revoked by the sea with celestial regularity. From the fluid, tidal defenses of Mont Saint-Michel, we travel to a fortress of absolute, immovable stone. In the lush, green heart of Sri Lanka, a single rock column rises with impossible suddenness from the surrounding plains. Sigiriya is a geological anomaly, a 200-meter-tall monolith of red stone that seems to have been thrust upward by the earth itself. In the 5th century, a king saw this not as a rock but as a throne. His name was Cassiopa, and his story is one of ambition, profound fear, and architectural genius. After a contentious rise to power that left him deeply insecure, Cassiopa did not seek to build a fortress on a mountain. He sought a mountain that could be a fortress, and so he chose the ultimate pedestal, transforming the entire summit of Sigiriya into a lavish palace complex, a royal retreat suspended between heaven and earth. The climb to his court was a carefully orchestrated trial, a physical and psychological journey designed to overwhelm any visitor, invited or otherwise. The first challenge was the steep, smooth walls of the lower rock face, polished by artisans to a mirrored sheen that reflected the blazing sun, making the surface treacherous and disorienting to even approach. The only way up was via a single, vertigo-inducing staircase clinging to the rock. This was not a grand avenue, but a vulnerable bottleneck, a place where a few determined defenders could hold off an army by simply cutting the stairs away or raining stones from above. But the true masterpiece of intimidation awaited halfway up. Here, the final ascent to the royal palace passed through the gateway of a mythical guardian. King Cassiopa's builders constructed a colossal figure of a lion, its massive brick and plaster form built onto a ledge of the rock. Visitors would enter the palace precincts by climbing a final set of stairs that emerged directly through the open mouth of the beast. This is the origin of the name Sigiriya, which means Lion Rock. The symbolism was unmistakable and terrifying. To approach the king, you had to literally walk into the jaws of a lion, submitting to his absolute power before you ever laid eyes on him. It was defense as theater, a psychological weapon that preyed on the mind before a single arrow was ever fired. From the summit, Cassiopa's defenders enjoyed a command of the landscape that was total. They could see an approaching force days in advance, and any assault would be a slow, grueling climb of exposed climbers who could be targeted with arrows, rocks, or even boiling liquids with ease. The palace itself, with its elegant pools and gardens built on the very edge of the cliff, was a display of serene control in the face of sheer terror. Sigiriya was more than a stronghold. It was the physical manifestation of a king's mindset, a blend of paranoid brilliance and artistic vision where every path, every wall, and every sculpture served a dual purpose of beauty and absolute defense. It asks us whether the greatest fortress is not just one that cannot be taken, but one that convinces everyone it is not even worth trying. The rock itself was their home, their road, and their secret. In the rolling hills of southern Tuscany, the town of Pitigliano does not simply sit atop its cliffs, it emerges from them. The soft, pale stone you see is tufa, a volcanic rock that hardened from ancient ash. To the Etruscans who first settled here, this was not a barrier but an invitation. They looked at these sheer 100-foot walls and saw not a cliff but a canvas. Over centuries, they and the medieval inhabitants who followed performed a kind of reverse architecture. Instead of building structures upward, they carved their world downward and inward, excavating the living rock to create a city that is quite literally part of the mountain. The houses that line the stunning cliff edge have foundations that plunge deep into the tufa, their lower levels hewn directly from the stone. But the true genius of Pitigliano lies beneath the visible town. Its primary defense was a masterpiece of subterranean strategy. While the vertical cliffs made a frontal assault from the valley below a suicidal endeavor, the real security was in a hidden network known as the Vai Cave, or sunken roads. These are not natural gorges, but deep, narrow trenches carved by hand through the solid tufa plateau above the town. Walking through one is an eerie experience. The walls rise 10, sometimes 20 meters high on either side, with only a thin strip of sky visible far overhead. They twist and turn, creating a shadowy labyrinth. For the people of Pitigliano, these were not just roads, they were concealed highways. In times of peace, they connected the town to outlying fields and sacred sites. But when threat loomed, they became a secret circulatory system. Defenders could move troops, supplies, or entire families from one part of the territory to another completely unseen by any enemy on the surface. An attacking force on the clifftops would find themselves hunting ghosts, never knowing if their quarry was ahead, behind, or moving silently beneath their feet through connecting tunnels. The town also carved vast cellar complexes, chambers for storing food and water, and even tombs, all tucked safely within the stone. This created a profound resilience. The community could withdraw into the earth itself, becoming virtually invisible. Pitigliano represents a different kind of impossible city, one where the line between the built environment and the natural world dissolves entirely. Its defense was not a confrontation, but a disappearance. The strategy asked a simple, brilliant question of any invader: how do you lay siege to a cliff or cut off supply lines to a labyrinth? The city's safety was woven into the very fabric of the land, a symbiotic relationship where to protect the people, you first had to find them. The sheer walls of Pitigliano provided a defense of invisibility, a city that could retreat into the stone. But what if the landscape itself performed the ultimate act of division? In the sun-drenched hills of Andalusia, the city of Ronda answers that question with breathtaking and terrifying clarity. Here, the earth did not simply rise up to protect a settlement, it tore itself apart beneath one. Ronda is not built on a plateau, it is built on either side of a chasm. The El Tojo Gorge is a violent scar across the landscape, a 100-meter-deep canyon carved over eons by the persistent Guadalvin River. The city does not overlook this gorge, it is defined by it, split cleanly into two distinct halves with the void between them. For centuries, this was not a picturesque feature, it was a colossal, natural moat of staggering proportions. Before the famous bridges were built, the chasm was a daily reality of profound separation. Crossing from the old Moorish quarter to the newer Mercadillo district meant descending treacherous, winding paths cut into the sheer rock face, fording the river far below, and then climbing back up the opposite cliff. This was not merely inconvenient, it was a foundational element of the city's defense, a masterstroke of military geography. Ronda's security lay in its forced division. An invading army could pour over the walls of one district, only to find their victory meaningless. Across a gap wider than any castle moat, the other half of the city remained intact, watching from an unreachable cliff top. To claim Ronda, you had to conquer two separate, heavily fortified towns, each with its own gates, walls, and defenders, and between them lay an abyss. Moving troops, siege equipment, or supplies from one captured side to attack the other was a logistical fantasy. It would require dismantling an army, sending it piece by piece down into the gorge and up the other side, a process that would take days and leave them utterly vulnerable to attack from above at every stage. The defenders, by contrast, could coordinate using signals and known, secret paths, striking where the enemy was weakest before melting back into their half of the city. The gorge turned every confrontation into two battles, doubling the cost and complexity for any attacker. This natural division created a unique form of resilience, ensuring that even in the worst circumstances, a core of the community could hold out, separated from the conflict by an impassable geological barrier. The later construction of the Puente Nuevo Bridge in the 18th century, a stunning feat of engineering that arches gracefully over the void, finally united the city in peace. But for hundreds of years before that, the terrifying beauty of the gorge was Ronda's greatest guardian, a reminder that sometimes the most formidable defense is not a wall you build, but a gap you cannot cross. The quest for safety could also be a journey toward the heavens. In the heart of Greece, a forest of stone rises from the plain, colossal sandstone pillars sculpted by wind and water over millions of years. Upon their summits, as if placed there by a gentle giant, perch the monasteries of Meteora. These are not castles built for kings or warriors, but sanctuaries constructed for peace and prayer. Yet, in their pursuit of spiritual isolation, the monks of the 14th century created what may be the most perfectly defended communities in history. Their primary threat was the expanding reach of the Ottoman Empire, a reality that made the earthly world feel increasingly perilous. Their solution was not to build higher walls on the ground, but to leave the ground entirely. They looked at these impossible rock towers, some soaring over 400 meters into the sky, and saw not obstacles but divine stepping stones. Reaching these summits was the first and greatest test. For centuries, access depended on a system that seems more like a legend than logistics. The monks used either long, lashed-together ladders that could be pulled up after them, or they were hauled aloft in large nets, suspended by a single rope that creaked over a wooden windlass. Imagine the act of faith required to sit in a basket, your life entrusted to a rope and a simple pulley, as you were winched into the sky, the world shrinking away below. This was a deliberate philosophy. The immense physical difficulty of arrival served as a filter, ensuring only the most devoted or the most desperate would ever reach the monastery gates. For a potential attacker, the challenge was insurmountable. A military assault requires numbers, equipment, and momentum. Here, all of that was negated. You could not scale the sheer, smooth rock with an army. You could only send a few climbers up a vulnerable rope or ladder, where a single monk with a knife could sever the connection and end the assault in an instant. A siege was equally futile, as the monasteries were designed for self-sufficiency, with cisterns carved into the rock to collect rainwater and storerooms for supplies. The very geography enforced a profound peace. Within these sky-bound communities, life was oriented inward and upward. The monks cultivated small gardens on terraces, painted exquisite frescoes in their chapels, and dedicated themselves to study and contemplation, all while suspended between earth and sky. The inaccessibility was not a hardship to be endured, but the very condition for their existence. It provided the silence and separation they sought, creating a literal and metaphorical distance from the conflicts of the world below. Meteora stands as a powerful testament to a different kind of fortress, one where the motive was not to dominate the landscape, but to transcend it. The defense was absolute, but it was a byproduct of a deeper search for connection. It poses a beautiful, paradoxical question. Can the pursuit of perfect peace create the most perfect stronghold? the sky was not the only refuge from a dangerous world. Deep beneath the surreal, fairy chimney landscape of Cappadocia, an entire civilization perfected the art of vanishing. Here, defense was not a matter of climbing higher, but of descending into a secret, inverted world. The soft, volcanic tuff rock that gave the region its whimsical above-ground spires held another, far more practical secret. It was incredibly easy to carve, yet hardened upon exposure to air, creating a material perfect for constructing not buildings, but their absolute opposite. The underground cities of Derinkuyu and Keimakli are not simple caves or shelters. They are meticulously engineered subterranean metropolises, some descending 8 or more levels deep into the eternal dark, capable of housing tens of thousands of people, their livestock, and all the supplies needed to survive for months. This was defense reimagined as disappearance. When scouts spotted dust clouds on the horizon signaling an approaching army, the entire population above ground would enact a well-rehearsed drill. Families gathered their essentials, shepherds drove their flocks down narrow ramps, and guards took up positions not on walls, but in the tunnels below. Then they sealed the world away. The entrances to these underground cities were masterpieces of simple, brute force engineering. Massive, circular stone doors, often over a meter thick and weighing several tons, would be rolled across the passageways. These were not mere barriers, they were geological plugs, fitting into grooves carved into the living rock so perfectly that from the outside the seam became invisible. An invader arriving at the surface would find a silent, empty landscape, with no hint of the thriving city hidden directly beneath their feet. The genius of these complexes, however, lay in their livability, which made prolonged isolation possible. Long, vertical ventilation shafts, sometimes stretching over 50 meters to the surface, provided a constant, hidden flow of fresh air to even the deepest chambers. These shafts were cleverly disguised as simple well openings on the surface, their true purpose concealed. Sophisticated water management systems tapped into underground aquifers or filtered surface water, ensuring a secure supply. The cities were organized with a clear logic, with stables on the upper levels, living quarters and churches carved deeper down, and communal kitchens, wineries, and storage pits at the lowest depths. But this underground world was also a carefully constructed death trap for any who dared to follow. The networks of tunnels connecting different districts and cities were a defensive labyrinth. Passages could be sealed at multiple points with smaller stone doors. Narrow corridors forced intruders to proceed single file, where they could be ambushed from hidden side chambers. Dead ends and confusing circular routes were designed to disorient and trap. Some shafts were even believed to be defensive pits, suddenly dropping away beneath an unwary foot. To enter this world uninvited was to step into a three-dimensional puzzle where every turn could be your last, and the very walls seemed to conspire against you. This represents the ultimate evolution of passive defense. It abandoned the notion of fighting at the gate entirely. Why meet an enemy on their terms when you could simply erase the battlefield? The strategy forced a horrific choice upon any attacker. You could camp on the barren surface, slowly starving while your quarry lived in relative comfort below, or you could send men into the dark, claustrophobic labyrinth where they would be hunted by defenders who knew every inch of the maze. It transformed invasion from a military campaign into a nightmare of subterranean warfare. Cappadocia's hidden cities ask a profound question about security. Is the strongest fortress not one that is impossible to breach, but one that cannot even be found? A world away from the dark labyrinths of Cappadocia, another culture perfected the art of living within the landscape, not beneath it. In the sun-baked canyons of the American Southwest, the ancestral Pueblones looked at the sheer, golden cliffs and saw not a barrier but a promise of shelter. Their answer to danger was not to dig down but to step back into the very embrace of the stone. The cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde are not buildings perched on a ledge. They are communities carefully fitted into enormous, natural alcoves that curve into the canyon walls. From the rim high above, these villages are completely invisible, their presence betrayed only by the thin, dark line of a smoke stain on the ceiling of the alcove, a subtle signature of life hidden in plain sight. This was a strategy of profound camouflage, turning the canyon's own architecture into a cloak. The genius of this defense lay in its simplicity and total control of perspective. Life in these cliff villages was oriented outward toward the vast canyon and the mesa top beyond. For the people living there, this provided a panoramic command of their world. Lookouts stationed at the edge of the alcove or on nearby outcrops could see for miles, spotting the dust of travelers or the movement of game long before they came close. This early warning system was their first and most crucial layer of security, but the true test came at the point of access. Reaching these alcoves was a deliberate, difficult puzzle. The routes were not roads, but a series of narrow footpaths, steep scrambles up rock faces using hand and toe holds carefully carved by generations, and most famously, ladders. These were not permanent fixtures, but tools of controlled passage. A series of long, wooden ladders could connect the canyon floor to the alcove high above, and in a moment they could be pulled up, severing the connection completely. Imagine the scene from an attacker's point of view. You have navigated the complex canyon system and finally located the village, a cluster of stone and plaster rooms tucked far overhead. Between you and your goal is a sheer, smooth cliff face, perhaps 30 or 50 meters high. The only way up is a single, fragile ladder or a narrow crack in the rock that forces you to climb one person at a time. You are completely exposed, your hands occupied with climbing, your movement slow and predictable. From the safety of the alcove above, defenders need only wait, armed with stones or simple weapons, to repel each climber as they reach the most vulnerable point. It was a defensive bottleneck of perfect efficiency. This way of life was born from deep adaptation. The alcoves provided natural protection from the harsh elements, shielding the dwellings from scorching sun, driving rain, and snow. The construction itself used local sandstone, mud mortar, and wooden beams, materials that made the villages blend so seamlessly with the cliff they seemed to have grown from it. Their security was not an added feature. It was woven into the daily rhythm of fetching water from the canyon springs, of tending crops on the mesa top, of watching the sun track across the sky from their sheltered doorways. For centuries, these communities thrived in their vertical villages, a testament to a philosophy of resilience that sought not to dominate the landscape, but to become a quiet, watchful part of its fabric. Their eventual departure, a migration influenced by complex factors including prolonged drought, left behind silent stone cities that still whisper of a time when safety was found not in fortifications, but in a careful, intimate conversation with the walls of the world. The Earth's bones can form a fortress that lasts for 1,000 years. In the heart of Scotland, a city grew in the shadow of its greatest protector, a geological titan known as Castle Rock. This is not a hill shaped by glaciers or rivers, but the ancient, hardened core of a volcano, a plug of basalt that refused to erode as the softer rock around it wore away. Upon this formidable stump, Edinburgh Castle commands the skyline not as a building, but as a continuation of the rock itself. Its strength begins not with stonework, but with a brutal fact of geometry. 3 sides of Castle Rock present sheer, unscalable cliffs that plunge straight down into what were once glacial lakes and are now city streets. For any army in history, these faces offered no purchase, no secret path, only a vertical drop to certain loss. This forced a cruel and simple logic upon every would-be conqueror. All approaches were funneled into a single, deadly corridor from the east, along the sloping ridge known today as the Royal Mile. An attacker's entire force, with all its siege engines and supplies, had to march directly toward the castle's main gate, compressed into a narrow street where every step was watched from the battlements high above. It was a gauntlet designed by nature and perfected by military engineers. The defenders' task was straightforward: make that final approach as lethal as possible. Over centuries, they layered gatehouses, drawbridges, and murder holes along this eastern ascent, creating a series of deadly checkpoints. An army that survived the arrows and boiling oil from the outer defenses would find themselves trapped in a confined space, facing yet another massive gate, with more death raining down from above. This geological setup made Edinburgh Castle famously difficult to take, but famously valuable to hold, a paradox that explains its long, turbulent history of sieges and repeated changes of hands. From the wars of Scottish independence to the Jacobite uprisings, control of this rock meant control of the kingdom's heart. It was captured and recaptured, not because its defenses were weak, but because its strategic prize was so immense. Rival Scottish clans, English monarchs, all were drawn to its power, each forced to play out the same brutal game on the same narrow stage. The castle's endurance through this relentless cycle of conflict is the ultimate testament to its foundational strength. While wooden palisades burned and stone walls could be breached, the volcanic basalt core remained. It was an everlasting strategic advantage, a platform that could be fortified again and again by friend or foe, because its fundamental, unchangeable gift was that of overwhelming defensive position. The story of Edinburgh Castle is not one of an impregnable fortress that never fell, but of a stronghold so perfectly conceived by nature that even in defeat, it dictated the exact, costly terms of its own capture, ensuring it would always be worth fighting to reclaim. The Rock of Edinburgh was a fortress of volcanic might, but another city drew its power from a substance far more delicate. On the southernmost tip of Corsica, the old town of Bonifacio does not simply sit upon its cliffs, it appears to be carved from the very light of the Mediterranean sun. The foundation here is a brilliant, blinding white limestone, a soft chalk that has been sculpted by wind and sea into a peninsula so narrow and sheer it seems to defy its own existence. For over 1,000 years, this luminous citadel has performed a breathtaking balancing act, a community living on the very edge of the world. Its defense was a masterful exploitation of two realms, the land and the sea, each offering a different kind of impossibility to any who threatened it. From the water, Bonifacio presented a smooth, unscalable wall of stone soaring 70 meters straight up from the turquoise waves. No invading fleet could hope to land troops at the base of these cliffs, let alone scale them under fire from above. The only concession the landscape made to the sea was a single, deep natural harbor, a narrow fjord cutting into the limestone. This was both the city's lifeline and its most critical choke point. The harbor was dominated completely by the citadel looming overhead, its cannons and archers able to rain destruction down onto any ship that entered without permission. Control of this single inlet meant control of all commerce and all naval access, a stranglehold on maritime life. But if the sea approach was suicide, the land approach was a slow-motion trap. The city occupies the very tip of its narrow peninsula, connected to the main island by a slender strip of land barely wider than the road that traverses it. To attack from land, an army would have to march down this exposed causeway with the sheer drop to the sea on either side, a procession in full view of the city's defenders for its entire length. There was no possibility of surprise, no flanking maneuver, no cover. You advanced in a thin line toward gates that grew only more formidable as you approached, while every soldier behind you became a liability, trapped on the same vulnerable ribbon of rock. This geography forced a brutal choice upon every would-be conqueror, to be funneled into a naval kill zone or a terrestrial shooting gallery. The Genos, who built much of the formidable citadel, understood this perfect defensive duality. They fortified the landward gates with massive towers and drawbridges, while ensuring every street in the upper town twisted and turned, creating a labyrinth for any who breached the outer walls. Meanwhile, they carved a secret staircase, the famous steps of the King of Aragon, directly down the cliff face to a freshwater spring at sea level, securing a vital resource even under siege. Bonifacio's strength was its utter lack of alternatives. It offered enemies no good options, only a menu of terrible ones. For centuries, it stood as a luminous sentinel over the strategic Strait of Bonifacio, its white cliffs a dazzling beacon and a stark warning, a city that mastered the art of making the beautiful utterly untouchable. Sometimes the greatest enemy is not an army but the noise of the world itself. High in the mist-shrouded cliffs of the Paro Valley, a sanctuary clings to the rock face not for protection from swords but from distraction. Paro Taktsang, the Tiger's Nest Monastery, seems to defy the very concept of foundation. Built in the 17th century around a sacred cave 900 meters above the valley floor, its whitewashed walls and golden roofs appear as if painted onto the vertical stone, a vision of serenity suspended in thin air. Its legendary origin speaks to its impossible nature. Tradition holds that Guru Rinpoche, the saint who brought Buddhism to Bhutan, arrived here in the 8th century by flying upon the back of a tigress. This is not merely a charming myth, it is a profound metaphor for the journey required to reach such a place. In a literal sense, no ordinary path could lead there. For centuries, the only access was along perilous, narrow trails that wound across the cliff face and over primitive bridges spanning dizzying chasms. These were not just routes, they were deliberate filters. In a moment of threat, a single bridge could be cut, or a section of path collapsed, severing the monastery from the world below as completely as if it had never existed. This created a physical and spiritual quarantine. The relentless climb, the thin air, the constant awareness of the vast drop just beside you, all served to strip away the mundane concerns of the valley. By the time a pilgrim or monk arrived at the monastery doors, they had already left the ordinary world behind. The architecture here served a dual purpose identical to the greatest military fortresses, control of access, but for an entirely different end. The isolation was not to keep people out, but to allow a profound inner journey to begin. Within those prayer halls anchored to the cliff, the only invasions to fear were those of attachment, anger, and ignorance. The only siege was the dedicated, lifelong effort to quiet the mind. In this way, the Tiger's Nest represents perhaps the purest form of defensive architecture. It was built to safeguard not bodies, but the conditions for enlightenment. The monks who lived there leveraged the landscape's absolute inaccessibility to create a perfect laboratory for the spirit, where the sheer effort of arrival ensured that every resident was fully committed to the work within. It stands as a breathtaking testament to a simple, powerful idea that the pursuit of the highest peace sometimes requires a retreat to the most impossible peace. While the Tiger's Nest sought spiritual elevation, another citadel used elevation to project absolute earthly power. High above the sacred city of Cusco, the fortress of Sacsayhuamán sprawls across a steep hill like a stone jaguar baring its teeth against the sky. This was not a hidden retreat, but a bold, declarative shield for the heart of the Inca Empire. Its genius lies in a terrifying fusion of form and function, where the very architecture was a weapon of psychological warfare. Approaching from the valley, the first thing you see are three colossal, zigzagging walls, each tier stepping back from the one below. These are not straight battlements, but a series of sharp, saw-toothed projections that create a labyrinth of dead ends and exposed flanks. For an attacker, this design was a nightmare of disorientation. Charging up the hill, you would be funneled into these narrow stone channels, only to find your way blocked, forcing you into a vulnerable turn where defenders on the tiers above could attack from three sides at once. Each zigzag created a perfect killing zone, turning the momentum of an assault against itself. but the true source of awe and the fortress's legendary reputation is in the stonework itself. The walls are built from enormous blocks of limestone, some weighing over 100 tons. These are not simple rectangles. They are polygonal stones, each with multiple irregular angles, fitted together in a dizzying, three-dimensional puzzle. The precision is so exact that you cannot slide a piece of paper between them, and yet they use no mortar. This technique, known as ashlar masonry, did more than create immense strength capable of withstanding earthquakes. It created a visual statement of supernatural mastery. To an enemy soldier looking up at these walls, the message was clear. The people who built this did not simply move stone, they persuaded it to melt and reform at their will. How could you hope to breach a wall that seemed grown from the earth itself? How could you defeat a civilization that commanded the mountains? While historians debate how often Sacsayhuamán saw actual battle, its role as a final redoubt is unquestioned. From its heights, sentinels had a panoramic command of the Cusco Valley and every approach to it. In the event of an attack on the city below, the Inca elite and military could retreat up this steep, fortified hill, where storehouses and cisterns would allow them to hold out. Its presence was a constant, looming guarantee of security for the capital, a symbol that the empire's spiritual and political heart was protected by a jaw of stone. Sacsayhuamán represents defense as a display of overwhelming capability, where the mere sight of the fortress was meant to drain an enemy's will before the first arrow was ever nocked. It asks us whether the most powerful deterrent is not just a strong position, but the undeniable proof of the ingenuity required to create it. Yet even the mightiest single fortress has its limits. The final evolution in this ancient quest for security was not a solitary stronghold, but a constellation of them. In the cold, clear waters of the Baltic Sea, a different kind of impossible city emerged, one whose strength lay in its deliberate fragmentation. Suomenlinna, the fortress often called the Gibraltar of the North, is not built on one island but woven across six. In the 18th century, when this part of the world was a chessboard for rival empires, Sweden looked at this scattered archipelago guarding the approach to Helsinki and saw a revolutionary idea. Why build one great wall when you could build an entire defensive ecosystem? The genius of Suomenlinna is that its impossible location is not a singular geological wonder, but a collective one. It is the strategic space between the islands that became the true fortress. Engineers did not just fortify the high ground, they weaponized the seascape itself. Each rocky islet received its own bastions, ramparts, and gun emplacements, positioned with meticulous calculation. The goal was to create a lethal, overlapping web of cannon fire. An enemy warship entering the narrow, winding channels would not face fire from one direction, but from 3, 4, or 5 islands at once. There was no safe angle of approach, no blind spot to exploit. A fleet would be caught in a deadly crossfire, forced to navigate a gauntlet where every turn presented a new battery of guns trained upon them. This was defense conceived as a distributed network, where each fortified island acted like a node in a larger, intelligent system. If one point was threatened, the others could reinforce it with supporting fire. If one fell, the others remained operational, continuing to deny passage. It transformed a cluster of unassuming sea-swept rocks into a single, cohesive, and seemingly impregnable naval barrier. The fortress was designed to be largely self-sufficient, with barracks, workshops, and dry docks spread across the islands, allowing it to withstand a prolonged blockade. This represented a profound shift in thinking. Security was no longer about retreating to an inaccessible peak or hiding within a cliff. It was about projecting control over a vast area, using geography to dominate not just a point on a map, but a critical line of communication, the sea lane itself. Suomenlinna proved that an impossible location could be engineered, not just discovered, by seeing the defensive potential in a scattered landscape and connecting it into an indomitable whole. From cloud-wrapped monasteries to cities carved within canyons, this journey reveals a universal truth. Ancient defense was less about brute force and far more about a deep, creative conversation with the world. It was the art of seeing a cliff not as a barrier but as a blank canvas for a community. It was the ingenuity to look at a raging river and perceive a moat, or to study a tidal flat and understand a dynamic, disappearing road. These 15 impossible locations are masterclasses in adaptive thinking. Each civilization, facing its own unique threats, asked a simple yet profound question of their environment. How can this place, with all its challenges, become our greatest protector? The answers they found were breathtaking in their diversity, yet united by a common thread: the transformation of apparent weakness into unassailable strength. The legacy of these places is not merely in their surviving stones, though those stones leave us awestruck. Their true legacy is in the timeless human impulses they represent: the deep-seated drive for security, the resilient need for community, and the irrepressible desire to create beauty and meaning, even and especially against the most daunting odds. These cities are monuments to the problem-solving spirit, proving that when survival is on the line, human imagination can perform miracles of adaptation. As we look at our modern world, the fundamental imperative remains unchanged. We still seek to protect what we hold dear: our homes, our ways of life, our ideas. Our landscapes have simply evolved. Today, our impossible locations might be digital, fortified by firewalls and encryption. Our moats could be economic or built from complex global supply chains. Our high walls might be constructed from laws, treaties, or shared beliefs. The tools and terrains are different, but the core strategic question persists: how do we create safety in an uncertain world? The ancient builders would likely understand, for they were the ultimate strategists, turning the very earth beneath their feet into a promise of tomorrow. If this exploration into history's defensive genius has captivated you, consider joining our community for more journeys into the past's most fascinating corners. Subscribe to keep discovering the stories hidden in plain sight, and we would love to hear from you. Which of these impossible cities left you the most amazed? Share your thoughts in the comments below.